I never thought it would happen to me. I had always heard about the dangers of Craigslist, but I never thought it would affect me and my family. It was just a simple ad for a used couch that caught my eye. My wife and I had been looking for a new one to replace our worn-out old one, and this one seemed like a great deal. We contacted the seller and arranged to pick up the couch that evening. When we arrived at the seller's house, everything seemed normal. He was friendly enough, and the couch looked even better in person than it did in the pictures. We paid him and loaded the couch into the back of our truck, eager to get it home. That's when things started to go wrong. As soon as we got home and started to move the couch into our living room, I felt a strange sense of unease. It was like there was something off about the couch, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. As the evening wore on, my unease turned to fear. My wife and I started to hear strange noises coming from the direction of the couch. It was almost like a scratching or tapping sound, but it was so faint that we couldn't be sure. Then, things started to get even weirder. My kids, who had been playing in their room, suddenly burst into the living room, screaming and crying. They said that they had seen a shadowy figure lurking in their room, and that it had scared them half to death. I tried to calm them down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. That's when I remembered the seller's strange behavior. He had seemed almost too eager to get rid of the couch, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was something he wasn't telling us. As the night wore on, things only got worse. The scratching and tapping sounds grew louder, and I started to feel like I was being watched. My wife and I were both on edge, and we couldn't help but jump at every little noise. It wasn't until the next morning that we discovered the truth. I was inspecting the couch, trying to figure out what was causing the strange noises, when I found a hidden compartment. Inside, I found a small, tattered notebook. The notebook was filled with ramblings about a demon that the previous owner of the couch had summoned. He had used the couch as a sort of portal to the demon's realm, and now the demon was using it to try to escape into our world. I knew then that we had to get rid of the couch, but it wasn't that simple. Every time we tried to move it, we would hear strange whispers and feel cold, clammy hands reaching out from the cushions. In the end, we had to call in a team of experts to get rid of the couch. They performed a complex ritual that involved chanting and burning sage, and finally, the demon was banished back to its own realm. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. I don't know if it's the demon, or just my own imagination, but I can't help but feel like I'll never be truly safe again. Despite the expert team's best efforts, the eerie presence in my home only seemed to grow stronger. My wife and I found ourselves waking up in the middle of the night, sweat-soaked and panting, to the sound of scratching, whispering, and the feeling of cold fingers running down our necks. We were exhausted, and our nerves were frayed. One night, while my wife was out of town on a business trip, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I armed myself with a flashlight, a kitchen knife, and a holy book I found in a local bookstore. I had read somewhere that demons are repelled by religious artifacts, so I figured it was worth a shot. I sat in the living room, the couch looming in front of me like a silent, malevolent presence. The scratching and tapping sounds were louder than ever, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, and I could almost make out words. "Come to me," the voice seemed to say. "I can offer you power, wealth, and eternal life." I shook my head and closed my eyes, trying to block out the voice. But it only grew stronger, and I felt a strange sense of longing welling up inside me. I opened my eyes and looked at the couch, and that's when I saw it. There was a small, glowing portal in the cushions of the couch. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, and I could feel its power calling out to me. I knew then that I had to destroy the couch once and for all. I raised the knife high above my head, ready to strike, but the portal pulsed again, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I stumbled and fell to the ground, dropping the knife and the holy book. As I lay there, struggling to regain my balance, I could feel the presence getting stronger. The whispers grew louder and more insistent, and I knew that I was running out of time. Suddenly, I heard a loud knock on the door. I struggled to my feet and stumbled over to answer it. It was my wife, back early from her business trip. She looked at me with concern as I stumbled and slurred my words, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. She helped me to my feet and led me away from the couch. As we moved further away, I could feel the demon's power fading, and the whispers growing fainter. In the end, we managed to destroy the couch using a mixture of holy water and fire. But even now, I can still hear the whispers in the back of my mind, and I know that the demon is still out there, waiting for its next victim. Despite destroying the couch, the eerie presence in my home refused to go away. My family and I were constantly on edge, always looking over our shoulders and wondering when the next terrifying incident would occur. One night, while we were all sitting in the living room watching TV, the lights flickered and went out. We heard strange noises coming from the kitchen, and my wife and I both felt a chill run down our spines. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made my way to the kitchen. As I rounded the corner, I saw a figure standing in the darkness. It was tall and gaunt, with glowing eyes and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. I froze in terror, but then I heard my wife calling out to me from the other room. Her voice gave me the strength to fight back. I lunged at the creature with the flashlight, hitting it square in the face. It let out an unearthly shriek and disappeared into thin air. We called in a team of paranormal experts again, and they confirmed our worst fears. Our home was built on an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of the dead were restless and angry. They were determined to take revenge on the living, and they had targeted our family as their next victims. The experts performed a series of rituals and ceremonies, and we could feel the presence in our home growing weaker. But we knew that it would never truly go away. In the end, we made the difficult decision to move away from the house. We sold it to a young couple, hoping that they would be able to make a new life there without the terror that had haunted us for so long. As we drove away from the house for the last time, I looked back at it in the rearview mirror. It loomed in the distance like a dark, foreboding presence, and I knew that we would never truly escape its grasp. To this day, I can still feel the chill of the spirit's breath on my neck, and I know that they are always watching, waiting for their next victim. As we settled into our new home, I felt a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. It was as if something was watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. One night, as we were all sleeping soundly, I heard a loud banging noise coming from the basement. I grabbed a baseball bat and made my way downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw a figure standing in the darkness. It was a woman, dressed in tattered clothes and covered in dirt and blood. She was staring at me with hollow eyes, and I could feel her malevolent presence filling the room. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The woman moved closer and closer, until I could feel her breath on my face. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and I knew that I was facing something far beyond my understanding. Suddenly, she disappeared into thin air, and the room filled with a deafening silence. I stumbled back up the stairs and collapsed into bed, shaking and covered in sweat. From that moment on, the nightmares only grew worse. I could feel a presence in every room of the house, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before it made its presence known again. One night, as I was sitting in the living room, I saw a shadow move across the wall. I turned around, but there was nothing there. I could feel my heart racing, and I knew that something terrible was about to happen. Suddenly, the lights went out, and the room filled with an eerie silence. I heard a whispering voice coming from behind me, and I turned around to see the same woman from the basement, her eyes glowing with a sinister light. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. The woman moved closer and closer, until I could feel her breath on my face. She whispered something in my ear, something so terrible that I can't even bring myself to repeat it. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she disappeared again, leaving me alone in the darkness. From that moment on, I knew that I could never stay in that house again. I packed up my family and fled in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. Even now, I can still feel the woman's presence, and I know that she's still out there, waiting for her next victim. I warn everyone I meet never to enter that house, for fear of what might happen to them. But I know that some will ignore my warning, and they will pay the price for their curiosity. Months had passed since we left the haunted house, but the terror we experienced never left us. My family and I were constantly looking over our shoulders, as if the spirit of that woman was still following us, waiting to strike again. One night, as we were driving home from dinner, we took a wrong turn and found ourselves on a deserted back road. The darkness was oppressive, and the trees seemed to reach out to us like skeletal fingers. Suddenly, we saw her. The woman from the haunted house was standing in the middle of the road, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. We tried to swerve to avoid her, but it was too late. As we crashed into her, the air was filled with the sound of shattering glass and twisted metal. We stumbled out of the car, dazed and confused, and saw the woman lying on the ground. But as we approached her, she rose to her feet, her eyes burning with an intense fire. She pointed a bony finger at us, and we felt a sense of dread wash over us. We knew then that she wasn't just a vengeful spirit, but something far more sinister. She was a creature of the darkness, a force that had been unleashed on the world, and we were nothing but prey in her eyes. As we tried to run, the woman pursued us relentlessly, her claws tearing through the air. We ran through the darkened woods, tripping and stumbling over roots and branches, but the woman was always there, her eyes glowing like beacons in the darkness. Just as we thought we had escaped, we stumbled upon an old abandoned house. We knew that we had to take our chances and run inside, hoping to find some refuge from the nightmare that was pursuing us. As we barricaded ourselves inside, we could hear the woman's howls of fury outside. We knew that we were trapped, with nowhere to run and no way to defend ourselves. In the end, we were powerless to stop her. The woman broke through the door, her eyes filled with a rage that we couldn't comprehend. We screamed as she descended upon us, tearing us limb from limb. As I lay dying on the cold, hard floor, I could hear her voice whispering in my ear, promising an eternity of pain and suffering. And in that moment, I knew that the darkness had claimed us all. Days had passed since the brutal attack by the woman in the abandoned house. But even in death, she refused to let us go. We were trapped in a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. Strange things started happening around us. We would wake up to find that our belongings had been moved, or that the air was thick with an otherworldly presence. We could hear the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway, but when we went to investigate, there was no one there. One night, as we were sitting in the living room, the TV suddenly turned on by itself. The screen was filled with static, but then the image of the woman from the abandoned house appeared. She spoke to us in a voice that was both haunting and alluring, promising us power and immortality if we would only submit to her will. We were terrified, but at the same time, we couldn't look away. As the days turned into weeks, we started to realize that the woman's hold on us was growing stronger. We could feel her presence everywhere, and we knew that we were being slowly dragged into the abyss. Then, one night, she finally revealed herself to us. We were sitting in the living room when the lights went out. The room was plunged into darkness, and we could hear the sound of the woman's laughter coming from the shadows. Suddenly, the lights turned back on, and the woman was standing before us. She was no longer the twisted, malevolent creature that we had encountered before, but a beautiful woman with a seductive smile. She promised us everything we ever wanted, but in return, we would have to give up our souls. We were trapped, with no way out. We knew that we were facing something beyond our understanding, something that could never be defeated. And so, we gave in. We sold our souls to the woman, and in return, she granted us power beyond our wildest dreams. We were no longer humans, but something else entirely, something that could never be understood or explained. And even now, as we walk the earth as creatures of the darkness, we can still hear the woman's voice in our heads, whispering to us in the dead of night. We know that we will never be free of her, but at the same time, we wouldn't want it any other way. For we have seen the true face of terror, and it has claimed us forever. As time went on, the power that the woman had granted us began to corrupt us from within. We had given up our souls for the promise of power, but we were unaware of the true price that we would have to pay. Our bodies began to twist and contort, becoming something inhuman and grotesque. Our once human forms were now twisted into horrific monstrosities that even we could barely recognize. The power that we had been granted was consuming us, and we knew that we were no longer in control. The woman's seductive promises had been nothing but a trap, and we had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. But even as we were consumed by the darkness, we couldn't help but feel a sense of fascination and awe at what we had become. We were no longer bound by the limitations of human flesh and blood, and we could feel the power coursing through our veins. But as we reveled in our newfound strength, we couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. We knew that the woman was still out there, watching us, waiting to strike. And then, one day, she finally did. We were walking down the street, our twisted forms drawing the attention of all those around us, when we saw her. The woman from the haunted house, the abandoned house, the one who had promised us power beyond our wildest dreams. But now, she was something else entirely. She was larger than life, towering over us like a colossus. Her eyes burned with an unearthly light, and we could feel the raw power emanating from her. We knew that we were no match for her. We had given up our souls for the promise of power, but we were nothing compared to the true darkness that she represented. And so, we ran. We ran as fast as we could, but we knew that it was futile. The woman was everywhere, her laughter echoing in our ears. We were trapped, with no way out. We knew that we had made a grave mistake in giving up our souls, but it was too late now. We were forever bound to the darkness, forever trapped in the nightmare that we had created for ourselves. And as we lay dying on the cold, hard ground, we knew that we had been defeated. The woman had won, and we were nothing but pawns in her twisted game. But even in death, we could still hear her voice in our heads, promising us a fate worse than death. And as the darkness closed in around us, we knew that we had truly made a deal with the devil. As the darkness consumed us, we felt a sudden jolt. We opened our eyes, only to find ourselves back in our living room, our wife and kids huddled together in fear. We were confused, disoriented, and terrified. We had no idea what had just happened or how we had ended up back in our home. But as we looked around, we realized that something was different. Our home was no longer the same as it had been before. The furniture was gone, replaced by strange and twisted objects that we couldn't identify. And then, we heard her voice. The woman from the haunted house was there with us, laughing in our faces. She told us that we had been trapped in her world, a world where reality was nothing but an illusion. We were horrified, but there was nothing that we could do. The woman had us trapped, and we knew that we were doomed. But then, something even more shocking happened. Our wife and kids suddenly stood up, revealing that they were not human at all. They were creatures of the darkness, just like us, and had been working with the woman the entire time. They had lured us in, pretending to be our family, and had convinced us to give up our souls to the woman in exchange for power. We were stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Our entire world had been shattered, and we realized that we had been playing right into the woman's hands. And as the woman and our false family closed in on us, we knew that there was no escaping the darkness that we had created for ourselves. In that moment, we realized that the true horror was not the woman or the haunted house, but the darkness that lurked within ourselves. We had made a deal with the devil, and now, we would have to pay the price for all eternity. As the woman and our false family closed in on us, we knew that there was no escaping the darkness that we had created for ourselves. They began to twist and contort, their forms becoming more and more grotesque until they were barely recognizable as human. Their eyes burned with an unearthly light, and we could feel the raw power emanating from them. We knew that we had made a grave mistake in giving up our souls, but it was too late now. We were forever bound to the darkness, forever trapped in the nightmare that we had created for ourselves. And as they closed in on us, we could hear their laughter echoing in our ears. We knew that we were doomed, that there was no escaping the horrors that we had unleashed. But then, something even more terrifying happened. Our own bodies began to twist and contort, becoming something inhuman and grotesque. Our once human forms were now twisted into horrific monstrosities that even we could barely recognize. We realized that we had become the very thing that we had feared the most. We had given up our souls for the promise of power, and now, we were nothing but monsters. And as the darkness closed in around us, we knew that we had truly made a deal with the devil. We were forever bound to the darkness, forever trapped in our own nightmare. The horror of what we had become was too much to bear, and we let out one final scream before being consumed by the darkness. Our souls were lost forever, trapped in the eternal darkness that we had created for ourselves. And as the woman and our false family disappeared into the shadows, we knew that we had truly made a deal with the devil, and the price that we had paid was our very souls.